Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing entitled Examining OMB's Memorandum on the Federal Workforce, Part 2. Expert views on OMB's ongoing government-wide reorganization. Thank you all for being here, for our witnesses to be here, and for others that are engaged in this. This is the subcommittee's second hearing on OMB's ongoing government-wide reorganization effort. I'll give you some quick context. 3 months ago, we heard from 4 executive branch agencies regarding their plans and progress towards achieving the targets and deadlines outlined in OMB's memorandum titled Comprehensive Plan for Reforming the Federal Government and Reducing the Civilian Workforce. In our first hearing on the reorganization, the Departments of Commerce, Justice, Agriculture, and Homeland Security praised OMB's leadership and inclusive approach in managing the reorganization process to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the federal government. These 4 agencies lauded OMB's decision to collect input from federal employees, from managers, executives, and most importantly, the American people to streamline operations, eliminate duplicative programs, and reduce wasteful spending. Further, we learned that OMB provided agencies with an aggressive yet achievable timeline to complete and submit their proposals for consideration. Agencies were to submit 3 items to OMB by June the 30th, 2017: draft agency reform plans, plans to maximize employee performance, and progress reports on near-term workforce reduction actions. All 4 of those agencies we asked when they were here if they were going to meet their deadlines. All 4 agencies said yes, they would meet those deadlines. By the end of September, agencies are supposed to incorporate OMB's feedback and submit their refined draft reform plans to OMB. At this point in the reorganization efforts, the subcommittee has heard positive news from many of the federal agencies regarding their progress towards achieving the OMB reorganization goals. We're also well aware of the costly duplication of programs performed by different agencies across government, the reason for this whole study. Let me give you an example of that. GAO keeps a running list of duplicative federal programs. They've already identified 79 new examples this year, and currently GAO estimates that 395 such examples have not been fully addressed, that is, duplicative federal programs. For example, the Federal Transit Administration administers $3.6 billion in grants to be awarded towards transit resiliency projects. However, GAO reports that it's likely that the Federal Transit Administration grants duplicative funding that is also coming from other agencies. In addition, the Department of Justice Criminal Division, DOJ, has 4 divisions which operate their own separate criminal sections. Timely and common-sense reorganization is something we should work towards in order to make government more responsive to the people it serves. Congress needs to be included in this process, especially if OMB plans to request executive reorganization authority or other legislative changes. The reformation of federal bureaucracy should not be a partisan issue. In fact, it's something presidents from both parties have done for more than 20 years. In his State of the Union address in 1996, President Clinton famously declared that the era of big government is over. He committed, this was his quote, to give the American people a smaller, less bureaucratic government in Washington and one that lives within its means. Similarly, President Obama remarked that we live in a 21st century economy, but we still got a government that's organized for the 20th century. President Obama went on to say, our economy has fundamentally changed, as has the world, but the government has not. The needs of our citizens have fundamentally changed, but their government has not. Instead, it has often grown more complex. Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama all sought to reform the federal government to make it leaner and more efficient for the American people. All of them took steps to modernize and reform government, but the job is clearly not complete. We have a duty to put partisanship aside so that we can accomplish reform that is still so necessary. The subcommittee intends to continue its work with this administration to ensure this reorganization effort is transparent and ultimately successful. We look forward to hearing testimony from OMB on this matter and in the near future. Thankfully, our 4 expert witnesses today are from a diverse array of outside groups, and they'll provide the needed insight into OMB's approach and central role into implementing the reorganization. Today's witnesses possess prior executive branch experience and management reform expertise, which enables them to offer valuable perspectives on the reorganization. I have the privilege of serving thousands of federal civil servants from Oklahoma, and I will seek to ensure this reorganization hears their input, improves their effectiveness, as they serve the American people. That's what they love to do and what they're being impeded to do by our organizational structure. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today and how we can work together to deliver a successful reorganization to the American people. With that, I'd recognize Ranking Member Heitkamp for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman.
Interestingly enough on that, I posted, which I do at times, I post on my Facebook page the topic of this hearing and just asked folks that are on it any of their ideas and thoughts on it. Lucy Perez of Oklahoma City posted this question: why don't we consolidate agencies and federal departments that perform similar duties? And I think it was an honest question. Why don't we do that? When I talk to anyone who's ever been with the OMB, they see the issues and say this function is done loosely by 4 different entities. Now, all of them will have a little slight variation on it, but 4 different entities basically do the same thing on it. The American people, definitely the people in Oklahoma see it. People all over the country see it. We have a bill called the Taxpayers' Right to Know that passed unanimously in the House, and over here is being held up by, I think, 5 of my colleagues that don't want to do it, but it basically forces a list of all of the things the federal government does, just so we can set them side by side and Congress can evaluate, just for transparency's sake, what are all the things that we do, where are they? We can't even get that list at this point. So the question is, help me and help her hear this answer. What is the issue of why, as it's called, cross-cutting, where you're looking at different agencies, an agency silo can evaluate it, but dealing with duplication in multiple agencies becomes harder? And how do we get through that?
It's kind of a philosophical question. I mean, I think, once a government institution is created, its ecosystem develops around it. It's got offices in OMB that are responsible for overseeing its management and budgeting. It's got oversight committees in Congress. It's got contractors, not like Grant Thornton, of course, but other contractors who are have an interest in doing business with that organization. So those tentacles make it really difficult to reform those organizations. Everybody, I think, has good intent. They want the mission to succeed, but they become too aligned to the status quo to want to move to something different. There's an enormous fear about what will result afterwards. Who will lose? Someone will have to lose. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case, but that's the fear.
Can I make a quick comment? I mean, sort of maybe obvious points, but I mean, if you have 2 $1 billion programs in different agencies that essentially do the same thing, the GAO would say that they're overlapping, et cetera, maybe that they're under the auspices of different congressional committees. Yeah. The folks who protect both programs, of course, in Congress would want to defend them both. And if you combine them to eliminate duplication, people would argue, well, we should spend $2 billion on the total because they were each $1 billion program. So there is an issue saving money. On the bigger sort of philosophical questions, Robert said, I have the stat in my testimony that in the private sector, there's just this automatic renewal that happens, as we all know. The bankruptcy in the private sector in America is absolutely enormous. There's a pretty standard statistic that 10% of all U.S. businesses go out of business every year, either through bankruptcy or something else. If the demand for a product falls, if the costs go too high, it just disappears in the private sector. And the government, unfortunately, it's very difficult to shift resources. They get sort of stuck where they get originally put.